Every morning, while the first rays of sunlight are still hidden behind the thick winter fog, Renee Thompson begins her long, solitary journey. She leaves her small, old house tucked away in the suburbs, where other houses keep their windows tightly shut, trying to hold on to the last bit of warmth. She wears an old, tattered coat, the only garment thick enough to withstand the biting cold. Her shoes, with soles worn down, creak against the freezing path. But no matter how harsh the weather is, no matter how her body aches from exhaustion, she keeps moving, for she knows she has no other choice. Each step Renee takes brings her closer to her job as a waitress at a small diner, where she earns a low wage, but it remains the primary source of income to support her 3 young children, Jerome, Maya, and Sophia. She knows she must work, must fight through life each day to ensure her children have enough books for school, enough food to fill their bellies, even if sometimes it's only cheap bowls of noodles. The long days of working from dawn till late at night leave her body sore, her legs perpetually weary. Yet she doesn't allow herself to stop. She knows that if she stops, everything will collapse. Too many times Renee has reminded herself that she has to be strong, has to endure, so that her children can have a better future. But sometimes as night falls and she returns home alone after long, tiring hours, she can't help but feel an overwhelming loneliness. The pain, the silent tears trickling down her face, reveal the deep marks left by the years. Renee's life is not only harsh because of poverty, but also due to the prejudice she endures from those around her. Each time she passes through the wealthy neighborhood on her way to work, she can feel the cold, disdainful glances directed at her. Strangers clutching their bags tightly, casting cautious and wary glances. They don't know her story. They don't understand that she fights every day to provide for her family. To them, Renee is just a poor black woman, someone who doesn't belong in their world. Renee's pride became the only armor shielding her from prejudice in those moments. She held her head high, maintained her steady pace, and tried to show that those looks didn't affect her. But deep down, each glance, each whispered word behind her back left a lingering wound, making her wonder if she was truly strong enough to keep going. She always acted as though she didn't need any help, because she was used to overcoming hardships on her own. And, to some extent, she believed that no one genuinely cared or wanted to help someone like her. Yet, in her weakest moments, when she sat alone in the dark room watching her children sleep, Renee could only hold her heart and silently pray for a miracle, for a day when she would no longer have to worry about paying the electric bill or buying medicine for her children. But she knew that miracles only exist in fairy tales, while her life was full of bitter realities. And so, Renee continued walking each day without rest, without complaint. Each step, each hour of hard work was for her children's smiles, for the hope that one day they would not have to live like her, facing contemptuous gazes or invisible prejudices. For Renee, her love for her children was the only source of strength that helped her endure the hardest days of her life. One morning, as usual, Renee was walking along the town's main road, her shoulders slightly hunched against the early morning chill. Nick, who had just finished his night shift, happened to be driving his patrol car down that road and saw her. At that moment, curiosity compelled him to stop, wondering why a woman would have to walk such a long distance every day. He slowly pulled over to the side of the road and rolled down his window. "Good morning," he said, keeping his voice gentle, worried he might startle her. Renee stopped, looking toward him with a hint of surprise. In her eyes was a cautious reserve, as if she were trying to figure out who he was and what he wanted. She kept her distance but still responded, her voice soft yet polite. "Good morning, officer," she said, as if wondering whether he intended to cause her any trouble. Nick gave a gentle smile, trying to ease the tension. "I'm Nick Harris, the patrol officer around here," he introduced himself, gesturing to the badge on his chest. "I often see you walking by here every morning. Are you all right? Do you need any help?" Renee frowned slightly, her eyes showing a hint of defensiveness. She was accustomed to wary looks and harsh comments due to her skin color and circumstances. Having the police officer suddenly show concern for her made her feel uneasy. "Thank you, but I'm fine," she replied, keeping her voice steady. "I'm used to walking." Nick looked at her for a moment, trying to understand what lay behind those cautious eyes, but he knew he shouldn't push too hard on a first meeting. "I see," he nodded, trying to offer a friendly smile. "I just wanted to make sure you were all right. Take care, and have a good day." Renee simply nodded, A faint smile on her lips, then turned and continued on her way, her small figure gradually disappearing into the early morning mist. Nick sat in his car watching her until she faded from view, his mind filled with unanswered questions. And from that moment he knew this was more than just a chance encounter. As Nick drove away, he couldn't shake the feeling that there was something deeper behind Renee's story. Why would someone choose to walk such a long distance every day? And why did she seem unwilling to accept any help? Those questions lingered in his mind, making him decide that he wouldn't easily dismiss his curiosity. Nick Harris had noticed Renee for a long time. As a dedicated police officer, he frequently patrolled along the town's main road, where he saw Renee walking every day, rain or shine. His wife Emily had passed away in a car accident while they were returning from a family outing. That day the sky was overcast and rain poured endlessly as if nature itself was mourning his loss. Since Emily's death, Nick felt as if his heart had been frozen. He no longer found joy in the small pleasures of life. Instead, he buried himself in his work as a way to escape the pain he could never truly confront. Nick poured all his time and energy into his career as a police officer. He became known as a strict and principled officer. In this small town, Nick was a responsible protector, someone everyone respected. He didn't shy away from challenging situations, whether complex cases or minor incidents. Nick frequently patrolled the neighborhoods, not only to maintain order but also to ensure that the vulnerable were protected and that the weak weren't bullied. He had rescued many people from dangerous situations and was always ready to listen to the concerns of the townspeople. This was why so many people trusted him and felt safe when he was around. Nick Harris grew up in a small house in the suburbs, where the cold winter wind howled through every crack in the windows, and in the hot summer, there wasn't even a decent fan to drive away the stifling heat. His mother, Ellen Harris, was a strong woman who had endured much hardship. She became a widow when Nick was only 10 years old. Nick's father, a factory worker, had died in a workplace accident, leaving Ellen with 3 young children and countless unpaid bills. As a child, Nick would often wake up in the middle of the night to see a light coming from the kitchen. He would quietly sneak down the stairs to find his mother sitting at the table, her tired hands rubbing her face etched with worry lines, her eyes fixed intently on the bills and crumpled budgets in front of her. Ellen often worked 3 jobs simultaneously during the day: as a clerk at a grocery store, in the afternoon as a housekeeper for wealthy families, and in the evening at a small diner. But she never complained, never let her children see her break down, even though each day was an unending struggle. Nick vividly remembered the mornings when, before dawn, his mother would have to wake up and walk several miles to work because the family couldn't afford a car. He recalled her coming home after a long day, her legs aching, and her hands calloused from the hard labor. Although she was white and lived in a town where everyone shared the same skin color, she still had to face life's hardships. Nick's mother wasn't subjected to prejudice, but she was abandoned by the system and the inequities of society, just as Renee was now enduring. These memories were deeply imprinted in Nick's mind, becoming an indelible part of him. They were the reason he chose to become a police officer, driven by the desire to help people like his mother, those who fought every day to provide for their families, asking for nothing more than a fair chance and a bit of kindness. When Nick saw Renee walking through town each day, her small but resilient figure, he couldn't help but be reminded of his mother. Although Renee faced discriminatory glances because of her skin color, while his mother didn't, the struggle and determination were strikingly similar. Nick recognized the pain Renee hid behind her forced smile and her resolute refusals for help. He saw in Renee the same worry that his mother had, the fear that if she stopped, even for just a moment, everything she had fought so hard to hold together would collapse. One day, as heavy rain poured down, Nick sat in his car, watching Renee's small figure through the water-streaked glass. Her coat was soaked, clinging to her like a second skin, her feet stepping through freezing puddles. At that moment, Nick felt a lump in his throat, as if he were looking at his mother on those cold winter days, walking along the flooded streets, carrying her pain and determination, all to secure a better future for her children. It was this that made Nick feel fondness for Renee, not out of pity but because he saw in her the same strength and resilience he had once seen in his mother. He understood that beneath her tough exterior, Renee also had fears and moments of weakness that she couldn't share with anyone, and it was her determination not to yield to her fate, just as his mother had done, that made him want to do everything he could to help her, to show her that the world wasn't always cold and indifferent. Nick knew he couldn't change his mother's past, but perhaps he could make a difference in Renee's present. And from that desire, from the deep empathy he felt for her, a sincere feeling began to blossom in his heart. Nick watched Renee's small figure fade into the distance, his heart heavy. He knew there was something deeper behind her determination, a pain she was trying to hide. And he also knew he couldn't easily let go of his intent to help. He would be patient, finding ways to prove that his kindness had no strings attached. He realized that sometimes helping someone isn't just about giving them a ride, but about restoring their faith that there are still people who genuinely care about them. It was one late afternoon when Renee was walking her children home from school. The air had turned colder, and the last sunlight of the day was fading behind old buildings. Renee held little Sophia's hand, while Jerome and Maya walked just ahead, chattering excitedly about their school lessons. Renee felt more at ease. These moments always gave her a bit of peace amid life's hardships. But then, the mocking laughter of a group of kids in the nearby park shattered the peaceful atmosphere. One of them, a white boy around Jerome's age, gave Jerome a hard shove and taunted, "Hey, why are you so dark? You know, your skin looks like mud. Why don't you go back to where you came from? No one needs you here." Jerome stepped back, a look of surprise flashing across his face, then quickly turning into deep hurt. He tried to stand tall, but his eyes were already brimming with tears. Maya held her brother's hand, though she too didn't know what to do. Renee froze, her heart wrenching in pain, as if each taunt was stabbing directly into her own heart. She wanted to rush forward to protect her children, but at that moment she was overwhelmed by helplessness and the pain she had kept hidden throughout her life. Just as Renee prepared to step forward, a firm and angry voice rang out, "Stop that immediately." Nick appeared from across the street, his gaze blazing as he looked directly at the boy bullying Jerome. He approached, his broad shoulders and powerful stance embodying a man accustomed to defending the vulnerable. "You have no right to say such things to anyone, especially about their skin color," he said, his voice carrying the weight of a warning. "Everyone deserves respect, no matter what they look like. If I see you bullying anyone again, I'll have to talk to your parents and the school." The boy stammered, and his friend started to back away, muttering reluctant apologies before running off. Jerome looked at Nick with tear-filled eyes, but there was also a hint of gratitude and admiration. Maya clung tightly to her brother, while Renee stood a few steps away, her hands trembling not from the cold, but from the emotions welling up inside her. Seeing Nick standing there, defending her son against such cruel words, Renee felt both a deep, wrenching pain and a glimmer of hope she thought she'd lost forever. She felt the pain of realizing that Jerome was facing the same hardships and wounds she had endured all her life. But at the same time, she felt a warmth spreading within her, seeing that someone was willing to stand up for her son, willing to confront the injustices of this world. At that moment, when Nick turned around, his gaze softened as it met Renee's. She saw the sincerity, compassion, and even the love he held for her and her children. And although she hadn't dared to dream too far into the future, for the first time Renee felt that maybe, just maybe, she wouldn't have to face all these hardships alone anymore. Perhaps with Nick by her side, they could build a better future together for her children, and for the love that was slowly blossoming between them. But just as hope began to flicker, an unexpected incident thrust them both into a challenge tougher than ever before. One evening, as Renee was preparing dinner in her small kitchen, she received a tense phone call from the school. Her eldest son, Jerome, had been attacked and insulted by a group of students. They had mocked Jerome's skin color, calling him cruel names, leaving him closed off and deeply hurt. Renee's heart wrenched as she heard Jerome's shy voice on the other end of the line, and tears streamed down her face as she thought of the pain her son had endured. When Nick found out, he immediately went to Renee's house. He took her to the school, his heart filled with concern. In the principal's office, they confronted the parents of the children who had bullied Jerome. Not only did these parents refuse to admit fault, but they also looked at Renee with contempt and scorn. One of the mothers in the group coldly remarked, "If you don't want your son to be treated this way, maybe you should find a place more suitable for your circumstances." The words felt like a punch to Renee's heart. She felt an overwhelming wave of shame and helplessness, but before she could respond, Nick stepped forward, his eyes blazing with restrained anger. "Enough," he said, his voice strong and authoritative. No child deserves to be treated like this for any reason, and your failure to see the wrong in your actions only reveals your shameful ignorance. The entire room fell silent under Nick's firm words. The other parents looked at him with surprise and hostility, but Nick didn't care. He turned to the principal, insisting that the school take strict action regarding the incident and ensure Jerome's protection in the future. Renee looked at Nick, tears streaming down her face. But this time it wasn't only out of pain. It was also with deep gratitude. She had never thought that anyone would stand up for her and her children the way Nick had. Every word he spoke felt like a promise that he would always be by her side, helping her face the injustices and hardships she had endured her entire life. At that moment, amid the judging and scornful looks from those around them, Renee felt a genuine glimmer of hope. She realized that Nick wasn't just someone who cared for her, but someone willing to fight for justice and equality. To Renee, this was more than love. It was a belief that, with Nick, she could build a better life where she and her children would no longer have to suffer from injustice. From that point on, a new bond between them grew stronger. Both Nick and Renee understood that this fight would not be easy, but they were willing to face it together. The difficulties and prejudiced looks from the community now became the driving force that pushed them forward. And in this journey, the love between Nick and Renee grew deeper, like a smoldering fire in the midst of a harsh winter, bringing warmth and hope to them both. However, despite their efforts to live true to their hearts, their relationship quickly became a topic of gossip among the townspeople, especially drawing sharp disapproval from Nick's colleague, Sergeant Roberts. Sergeant Roberts had been close to Nick since his early days in the force, and he had always regarded Nick as a younger brother. When he learned that Nick had started a relationship with Renee, a black woman and a single mother of 3, Roberts couldn't hide his dissatisfaction. He confronted Nick one afternoon while they were working in the police office, his voice filled with a mix of concern and reproach. "Nick, what do you think you're doing?" Roberts asked, looking Nick straight in the eyes with a stern expression. "I've heard the rumors going around town. You know what people are saying about you and Renee. Are you really willing to put yourself in such a difficult position? You're a police officer. You should think about your honor and the reputation of the entire force." Nick sat silently, listening to each word Roberts said. Outside, the rain poured heavily, the weight of each raindrop on the metal roof seeming to mirror the heaviness in his heart. Nick knew that what Roberts was saying wasn't entirely wrong. Ever since he began caring for Renee, rumors had spread everywhere. Malicious looks, whispers behind his back, and even the distance of some colleagues he had once been close to. In a small town, their relationship was not only about racial differences, but also about breaking the unspoken rules that society had long upheld. Nick felt as if there was a battle raging inside him. On one side was the love he felt for Renee, deep and genuine, not out of pity but out of respect for her strength and resilience. He knew Renee had endured so much, had faced every hardship in life, and he didn't want her to suffer any more pain. But on the other side, he couldn't ignore the pressure from public opinion, the scrutinizing looks of those he once called friends and colleagues. Roberts looked at Nick, and seeing that he wasn't responding, he continued, his tone softer yet still firm. "Nick, I understand that you're swept up in your emotions, but think about the consequences. Someone like Renee, she isn't right for you. You're going to lose the career you've spent years building for a relationship that this whole town will never accept. Are you sure you're willing to risk it all for that?" Nick stood there in the pouring rain, the cold seeping through to his bones, yet his mind was ignited with a fierce determination. He thought about Roberts's words, the rumors from colleagues and townspeople, and all the skeptical looks that had surrounded him recently. But above all, he thought about Renee, her gentle smile, her strength, and the love in her eyes when she looked at her children. He remembered how she made him feel that, no matter how harsh life was, there were still moments of hope and warmth. Nick took a deep breath, letting the scent of rain fill his lungs, and he knew he had made his decision. Leaving behind the warnings and the pressure, he returned to the office, looking Roberts straight in the eye with a newfound resolve. "Roberts, I know you're concerned for me, and I'm truly grateful for that," Nick began, his voice warm yet resolute. "But love doesn't care about skin color, status, or what others think. Renee is not a mistake. She's the person I want to be with, the person I want to build a future with. Roberts looked at him, surprise evident in his eyes, but Nick wasn't waiting for agreement or approval. He left the office, his heart racing not with worry, but with a newfound determination. He drove to Renee's house, the lightning flashing across the horizon as if signaling a new beginning. When he arrived at Renee's door, she was already standing there on the porch, her shoulders gently trembling in the cold wind. Seeing Nick, she couldn't hide the worry in her eyes. She had feared that the rumors and societal disapproval would push him away, that once again she would have to face everything alone. But Nick walked toward her without hesitation. He gently took her hand, feeling the chill through her trembling fingers, and looked deeply into the eyes he had come to love without even realizing it. "I choose you, Renee. I choose our love, no matter what others say, no matter if it means facing the world. You've taught me that life isn't about living by others' prejudices. It's about staying true to your own heart." Renee felt her heart swell with emotion. Tears streamed down her face, not from pain but from profound joy. She had been so used to facing everything alone that she had forgotten that sometimes someone could truly stand beside her, walking with her through the hardest days of her life. "Nick, are you sure?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly, unable to believe what she had just heard. "I don't want you to have to sacrifice everything for me, for us." Nick smiled, a radiant smile that Renee had never seen on his face before. "I've never felt like I was sacrificing anything. I only feel like I've found what I've always been looking for, a person I want to love, a family I want to protect." At that moment, amid the pouring rain and the chill of the dark night, they held each other, finding refuge in each other against life's storms. Nick no longer cared about the judgmental glances, and Renee no longer feared prejudice. They only knew that together they were stronger, with enough love to overcome any obstacle and build a new future for themselves and the children. From that point on, Nick and Renee began a new journey, one that wasn't easy but was filled with trust and hope. In the days that followed, they faced prejudice and the cold distance of some people around them, but they also found open arms from those who truly understood and supported their love. Gradually, the story of Nick and Renee became a living testament to the power of love, resilience, and compassion. And in that small house, where children's laughter filled the air each afternoon, where dinners were shared in simple happiness, Nick and Renee knew they had found the most precious thing, a family, a love, and a life they had always deserved.